One question I often get, because sennder is really focused on getting electric trucks onto the road directly as well, is occasionally I hear that maybe batteries are extremely bad for the environment. I'm not sure where this idea came from, but maybe you could comment on the sort of life cycle emissions reductions that come from using battery electric versus diesel.
Yeah, we hear that question also quite often, and especially what we've seen and what research has shown in and out every single time, every study reconfirmed it actually. Battery electric trucks are by definition more sustainable than diesel trucks. Even if you charge your battery electric truck with a very dirty grid based out of coal, take Australia, for instance, or take Poland, which have relatively dirty grids still. The emissions over the lifetime of the vehicle are lower using a battery electric than a diesel truck. So the argument against it, to say this is I think is a wrong argument. And secondly, I think what I always also say is like the grid today is maybe a dirty grid, but all of the grids are rapidly decarbonizing as well. So over the 7 years or 10 years or 15 years that truck is operating, the emissions only go down, and it only gets better over time. So to everyone who's still asking that question, I hope they know by now that this is not true.
It's interesting because that's also exactly that's another example of this dynamic where electric and fossil fuel technologies actually diverge. Because if you buy a diesel truck, it actually gets less efficient every year. Yeah. But if you buy an electric truck, it's actually getting more efficient with regards to carbon emissions every year because the grid that it's charging from is getting better.
It's only improving over time. There was actually a concept that we introduced a couple of years ago. We don't practice it too much anymore, but it is called total emissions of ownership. Which is to look at the full life cycle analysis over also a period of time. Total cost of ownership is always based on the principle, okay, you buy the truck, you operate it for a couple of years, and then you sell it off, roughly. Yeah? So that's the total emission of ownership work exactly the same way. The production of a truck has certain emissions, the operation of the emissions of the truck has a certain emissions, and then there's a second life emissions probably from the scrappage or reusage as well. If you compare those two, but especially total emissions, and you compare then the different solutions that are out there, then battery electric trucks by far always exceed the emissions from any other, or lowering the emissions than the others do.